The Greatest Gift by Philip Van Doren Stern. The Afterword by Margaret Stern Robinson. My father, Philip Van Doren Stern, was shaving on Saturday morning, February 12, 1938, while he explored the idea for the story, The Greatest Gift, which became the basis for the movie It's a Wonderful Life. The idea had come from a dream he had during the night. As he wrote in his notes, the idea came to me complete from start to finish, a most unusual occurrence, as any writer will tell you, for ordinarily a story has to be struggled with, changed around, and mixed up. In contrast to his other writings, mainly on history, he said that the idea for The Greatest Gift had emerged full-blown, and he had never considered changing it. What he had to do, he said, was to learn to write it. In April 1938, my father wrote the first draft of The Greatest Gift. I was just learning to write fiction, so that first version was pretty terrible. Fortunately, I knew it was, so I had the sense to put it away. A few years later, I tried again. The results were still no good. He waited until the spring of 1943 before rewriting the story and showing it to his agent, who said that she liked it, but that it would be difficult to sell a fantasy to the magazines. My father wrote, "After she had tried everything from the Saturday Evening Post to farm journals, it was evident that no magazine would touch it. By this time, I had become fond of the story that nobody wanted. I revised it again and had 224-page pamphlets printed at my own expense. I sent these out at Christmas cards for Christmas 1943. How many pages was it? 224 pages. So this has a couple more pages to it. Christmas 1943. I was in the 3rd grade then, and remember delivering a few of these cards to my teachers and to my friends, who were children from families of a variety of backgrounds and religions. My father, who was himself from a mixed religious background, explained to me that while the story takes place at Christmas time, and that we were sending it as a Christmas card to our friends, it is a universal story for all people in all times." A few months later, in March 1944, I answered the telephone one evening in our home in Brooklyn. It was a Western Union operator who asked to speak to my father, and I knew that in 1944 receiving a telegram often meant bad news. My father took the phone, listened to the operator read the telegram, and then turned to my mother saying, "Hold me up, I can't believe it." I thought something terrible had happened. It was, however, a telegram from my father's agent, announcing that she had received an offer from a well-known studio for the movie rights to The Greatest Gift. My father agreed, and planning began in Hollywood. During World War II, my father was an editor and member of the planning board for Armed Service Editions. Oh my goodness. Ugh. Well, you're stuck in here now, so try and get out. Cats. What can you do? Alright, anyways. During World War II, my father was an editor and member of the planning board for Armed Services Editions. And general manager... Can you stop talking, please? Thank you. And general manager of editions of the Armed Services. Many kinds of books were selected and produced on a large scale in volumes sized to fit into the pockets of Armed Services uniforms. People who returned home after the war often told him how much those books meant to them, and how they had helped to keep up morale. After the war, he worked in publishing and advertising, but he was a writer at heart. When an interviewer asked him about his interests, he said, "I'm not interested in knowledge." He wrote or edited more than 40 books on a wide range of topics, with many on different aspects of the Civil War. Shortly after the war ended, Frank Capra was discharged from the Army and returned to the United States after reading The Greatest Gift. He became excited about its possibilities as a film and wanted Jimmy Stewart for the leading role, a highly decorated World War II hero. Stewart heard about the story in the fall of 1945, just after he had been discharged from the Air Force. "I got a telephone call from Frank Capra," he said. "I've got an idea for a story. Come on over to the house, and I'll tell you." So I went over. The two main ideas were, 1, no one is born to be a failure, and 2, no one is poor who has friends. He told me all this, but then he said, I don't know. I said, "Frank, please, I think it's wonderful." In an interview for the American film Published in October 1978, Capra said, "This was my first picture after having been in uniform and out of the theatrical films for 5 years. I was scared to death. We were at RKO and Charles Corner, the studio head, came in. He said, 'I've got just the story for you. You've got to read it. We've got 3 scripts on it.' I said, 'Well, what about the scripts?' He said, 'Oh, they missed the idea.' 'What idea?' 'The idea I paid for when I bought this Christmas card. I paid $50,000 for it.' 'You paid $50,000 for a Christmas card?' 'Boy, I've got to see that Christmas card.' And there it was, a story about a man who thought he was a failure and who was given the opportunity to come back and see the world as it would have been had he not been born. Well, my goodness, this thing hit me like a ton of bricks." Capra wrote about The Greatest Gift. "It was the story I'd been looking for all my life. Small town, a man, a good man, ambitious, but so busy helping others, life seems to pass him by. Despondent, he wishes he'd never been born. He gets his wish. Through the eyes of a guardian angel, he sees the world as it would have been had he not been born. Wow, what an idea. The kind of an idea that when I get old and sick and scared and ready to die, they'd still say, 'He made the greatest gift.'" The screenplay by Francis Goodrich and Albert Hackett was widely acclaimed, and It's a Wonderful Life, the film based on The Greatest Gift, was released in December 1946. Life magazine ran 2 articles on it, and it was broadcast from coast to coast by CBS, and in other parts of the world by the State Department. The world premiere was held on December 20th, 1946, at the Globe Theater in New York. For the benefit of the Boys Club of New York, we were relieved to discover at the premiere and after the movie was released that we were not alone in our enthusiasm for It's a Wonderful Life. Many people loved the movie and said they watched it over and over. While not originally a box office success, over time It's a Wonderful Life became immensely popular, eventually a Christmas classic. Jimmy Stewart wrote to my father on December 31st, 1946, "More important than anything, thank you for giving us that idea, which I think is the best one that anyone has had for a long time." It was an inspiration for everyone concerned with the picture to work in it, because everyone seemed to feel that the fundamental story was so sound and right, and that story was yours, and you should be justly proud of it. Starting with those 200 Christmas cards, the messages of my father's story have reached millions of people. Many who have read The Greatest Gift have told me over the years that they love the story and read it often, and many more who have seen the film have said that It's a Wonderful Life is their favorite of all movies. It doesn't seem to matter who they are or what they do. Age, gender, occupation, race, religion, income level, nationality, politics. None of these factors seem to make any difference when it comes to the people who say this is their favorite film. In 2007, the American Film Institute ranked It's a Wonderful Life as a number 20 of the 100 greatest movies of all time. In 2008, it was also ranked 3rd among AFI's top 10 fantasy films of all time. After the film's premiere, my father sent one of the original Christmas cards to Frank Capra, who replied, "I thank you for sending it, and I love you for creating it." Capra referred to my father as the man whose Christmas tale was the spark that set me off into making my favorite film, It's a Wonderful Life. Much later, Jimmy Stewart said that of the more than 70 films he had made, this was his favorite. In his autobiography, Capra wrote of It's a Wonderful Life, "I thought it was the greatest film I ever made. Better yet, I thought it was the greatest film anybody had ever made." He described the theme in this way. It's a Wonderful Life sums up my philosophy of filmmaking. First, to exalt the worth of the individual. Second, to champion man, plead his causes, protest any degradation of his dignity, spirit, or divinity. And third, to dramatize the viability of the individual as in the theme of the film itself. There is a radiance and glory in the darkness, could we but see, and to see we have only to look. I beseech you to look. Nearly 70 years after The Greatest Gift was written, and It's a Wonderful Life premiered at the Boys Club of New York, the themes of story and film and the views, convictions, and passions of the characters seem to be still considered relevant to our lives today. Why do George Bailey, Henry Potter, and others appear in the press and other media so many decades later as we today struggle with a variety of economic, financial, and moral issues and controversies? Three quite different examples indicate the breadth of story and film and suggest their relevance in the 21st century. Trying to get through this whole thing. All right, let's keep going. My voice is tired and I ran out of water. Financial inclusion. George Bailey, Jimmy Stewart, runs the Bailey Brothers Building and Loan Association, a firm providing commercial financial services to many in and around the fictional town of Bedford Falls. Many of the Building and Loans clients are among the town's low-income population who made good use of their mortgage loans and other financial products, and over time were able to build a small house, increase their income, and improve their lives. But Henry Potter, Lionel Barrymore, majority shareholder in Bailey Building and Loan, and George's nemesis, aims to stop the Building and Loan from providing home loans and other financial services to the working poor. Wealthy, powerful, corrupt, and ruthless, Potter plans to gain control of the firm. His interest in real estate is in renting rundown slum shacks to poor people at high rents, having already taken control of the bank, the bus line, and the department stores in Bedford Falls. Potter now prepares to take over the Bailey Brothers Building and Loan Association. George and Mr. Potter would be quite at home in today's controversies about mortgages, bank failures, and home foreclosures. The headline of a November 2008 article on the recession in the New York Times asks, "What would George Bailey do?" The author, Edward Rothstein, looks at It's a Wonderful Life for possible parallels or analogies that might help in understanding the current recession. George, he writes, stopped a run on the Bailey Brothers Building and Loan Association that would have destroyed it. But his predicament with its eerie prefigurement of the present provokes a closer look at the crossroads in which culture and finance intersect. As the 2008 recession developed and its depth and potential duration became increasingly apparent, Mr. Potter and his financial manipulations, profit strategies, and outright theft have been frequently remembered and compared with their large-scale modern equivalents. George Bailey, too, has been widely quoted and cited. In a letter to the New York Times published on Christmas Day 2008, Tom King of West St. Paul, Minnesota, wrote, "What's gotten us in this huge pickle today is that the take-the-money scheme of the Mr. Potters of the world. What can save us are the honesty and concern for others of the Georges of the world. George's angel, Clarence, needs to get busy now, and he's earned his wings." The awesome power of apparent insignificance in history. With the Potter engineered problems for the Bailey Building and Loan, George becomes deeply depressed and decides to commit suicide. His guardian angel, Clarence, is sent from heaven to help him, and he saves George's life. George tells Clarence he wishes he had never been born. Clarence grants his wish, and George learns what the world would have been like without him. No one in Bedford Falls recognizes him, and even his parents have no use for this stranger. As a child, George had saved his brother Harry from drowning. During the war, Harry saved alternative reality. Harry saved the lives of everyone. He saved his brother Harry from drowning during the war. And during the war, Harry saved the lives of everyone on his troop ship. Blech. But in the alternative reality that Clarence had set up for George, all of them had died. And George begins to understand also what happened when the Building and Loan collapsed and when Bedford Falls became Pottersville. The distinguished natural historian Stephen Jay Gould refers to It's a Wonderful Life in the introduction in the book It's a Wonderful Life, The Burgess Shale and the Nature of History, which is about the evolution of organisms. The title of the book expresses the duality of our wonder and the beauty of the organism themselves, and the new view of life that they have inspired. This theme is central to the most memorable scene in America's most beloved film, Jimmy Stewart's guardian angel replaying life's tape without him, and demonstrating the awesome power of apparent insignificance in history. Gould wrote me saying, "Now that I read your father's book, I realized that the key scene that served as my inspiration is in fact the source of the entire idea for the movie. I was delighted to recognize how faithful and respectful Capra was to its meaning and intent. George begs to be returned to his life, and Clarence grants his wish. George is then home in the Bedford Falls that he knows so well, and with widespread support from his family and his many friends, neighbors, and clients, he can now continue and expand the Bailey Brothers Building and Loan, providing decent, affordable housing and other financial services. And George has learned that he and his work are indeed significant. Mr. Potter will still be there, but there will be choices and lessons for others. Ooh, we're close to the end. Don't you worry, we are close to the end. How much close? We have 55 of 51. 4 more pages to go. Lessons for us. Human Life and the Inner Mind. In a 2011 article called Social Animal, David Brooks explains a debate in our culture about what really makes us happy, which is summarized by, on the one hand, the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and on the other, the movie It's a Wonderful Life. The former celebrates the life of freedom and adventure. The latter celebrates roots and connections. Research over the past 30 years makes it clear that what the inner mind really wants is connection. It's a Wonderful Life was right. My father would be happy to know that the greatest gift and It's a Wonderful Life live on even in our day. People today still think of, cite, write, argue, and perhaps learn from those living in the fictional Bedford Falls so many decades ago. The film and the story on which it is based have reached and influenced millions of people. I am one of them. For over 3 decades, I have worked extensively on the development of commercial microfinance in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, primarily as an advisor to large banks and others providing financial services to many millions of economically active poor people, previously excluded from formal financial services. And I have long experience as a policy advisor to finance ministries, central banks, and commercial banks. But it was not until 2001, when I was writing the preface to the first volume of my book, The Microfinance Revolution, that I realized fully how much of my lifetime career is owed to the underlying influences, the greatest gift, and It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey, Mr. Potter, Mary, Clarence, Frank Capra, and of course my father, have had a major effect on my life in microbanking, which continues still. I was the only child of my parents, Philip Van Doren Stern and Lillian Diamond Stern. Our family, my late husband, Alan Richard Robinson, and our 3 daughters, Sarah Penelope Q. Robinson, Pia Robinson Geller, and Laura Ondine Robinson. I hope I got those names correct. Our wonderful sons-in-law, grandchildren, and others, family members, are heirs to more than my father's literary property. We are the heirs to his ideas and his values. We hope that this book will bring joy to those who already know and love the film classic, and that it will reach a broad audience of all generations. The greatest gift is as compelling today as it was nearly 70 years ago, because in this story lies a powerful message about the significance of the lives of all of us. As for its author, Philip Van Doren Stern, I borrow a line from George Bailey's brother, Harry. He was the richest man in town. Notes. There are a few reference points, so I'm going to go ahead and read them out, because this is where I fill you in with everything extra. 1. The quotations. 1. Janine Bassinger, Francis Goodrich, Leonard Maltin, and the trustees of the Frank Capra Archives, the It's a Wonderful Life book, New York, Alfred A. Knopf, 1986, page 77. 2. Frank Capra, the name above the title, an autobiography, New York, Macmillan, 1971, Bantam, 1972, page 417. 3. Bassinger et al., page 85. 4. Capra, page 133. 5. Bassinger et al., page IX. 6. New York Times, p. C-1, November 4th, 2008. 7. New York Times, Letters, p. A-22, December 25th, 2008. 8. Stephen J. Gould, Wonderful Life, The Burgess Shale and the Nature of History. New York, W. W. Norton, 1989, page 14. 9. David Brooks, Social Animal, The New Yorker, January 17, 2011, page 28, or P28. About the author. Philip Van Doren Stern, 1900 to 1984, was an American author, editor, and Civil War historian whose story, The Greatest Gift, became the basis of the classic Christmas film, It's a Wonderful Life. That is the whole of this book, everything included, and now I'm going to talk about the book. I like it. It is fun to see the origin of my favorite film, It's a Wonderful Life. The name changes how Henry Potter is just a photographer versus in the film where he's the villain in essence, the globalist, the man who wants all the power. That is, that's who he is in the movie. And in this, he's just a name that appears that took a photograph that is consequential and inconsequential. The fact that the tree still makes it in, I liked that. I like the just straightforward, it gets point to point to point to point. And it it flows much, much more rapidly, but still hits the important points, just like It's a Wonderful Life does. Mary being married to Art Jenkins, who seems to be rolled into... I don't think there's an Art Jenkins specifically in It's a Wonderful Life off the top of my head, but his character seems a little bit attached to George's, where George starts drinking alcohol after being transported. Clarence, just being a pop-in, pop-out character, I think is fun. You don't even hear his name in the book, as far as I can remember, having just read it, literally. So that's fun that he just appears. He's like, oh, by the way, you'll need this. I like that he gives George the brushes and tells him how to introduce himself to not make it weird that everything just happened. That's fun as well. Yeah, the point of the story is basically the exact same. I've watched and read a couple of Frank Capra's other films based on movies and read the books based on books that he... Something's in my throat. Books based on movies, including Lost Horizon, and he generally keeps the core, the heart of the book, while changing the parts that don't flow as well as a movie and making it much more cinematic. And that's one of the things I really appreciated. Frank Capra loved books, loved making stories, and whenever he saw a book that he was just like, this book has something important to say, he would immediately just be like, buy the film rights, work with a couple of people that he trusted to do all of the... He had his team, let's put it that way. And he'd tell his team about everything and be like, we're making this, this is good, I like it, we're doing a good job here. Yeah, but I like seeing Art Jenkins marry, because there was somebody else who was interested in Mary, his friend, who ends up being the big businessman who goes, hee-haw. What was his name? I can't remember what his name is in the movie, but I don't think it's Art. But yeah, seeing the contrast, because in the movie, Mary is just an old spinster, which she says would happen if George had never married her. And so it's nice to see that George gets to see the impact of his life on her 2 different times, and the difference in the children, the way they turn out, how Art has certain children, and how he has certain children, how the children that she has with Art just... they aren't happy. Their life is bad versus whenever he's there. They have a bigger family and more of them are happy. I did really like how Mary won the argument about the couch on both accounts. That was a really fun and cute detail. It helps make them seem more alive while it helps them seem... the characters seem more alive as book characters, even though you don't get to experience anything outside of the book with them. So you're like, oh, these are characters that have full lives that I'm just getting to read about for a short period of time. Let me think. Is there anything else I want to say? I cannot think of anything else off the top of my head, even though I feel like there was something. Yeah, the building and loan, how he was just a bank clerk. He wasn't the owner of a building and loan. He was just a bank clerk. And the dad is alive in the book versus in the movie. The dad dies, which spurns on a lot of decisions and actions. I also like how you get to see more in the movie. I like how you get to see more of what George Bailey's character does, why people like him so much. And his name's George Harris in the book versus in the movie, where it's George Bailey, which I think is a good change. George Harris is a little rougher. George Bailey is just two different names that sound kind of homely and friendly, which is what you want the character to be. You want him to be homely and friendly. Whereas in this, he's very much more of a status quo kind of guy. But it's just like, status quo is good, which is part of what Frank Capra wanted. But again, because he's thinking in the case of like moving your emotions and stuff, name changes are sometimes good, although not necessary. But in the case of George Bailey, I think it was a good call changing Harris to Bailey, because Bailey's just nicer. And it's funny how I think they use every single name in this book as a character in It's a Wonderful Life, even if they don't use the character as they used it in the book versus the movie, which is nice. I like that. And yeah, just what a legacy that this book has left. Crazy what it's gone through, what it's done, how it's helped people, how even myself, I've cried watching the movie and getting to read this and be like, man, this is really good. I like it. Glad I added it to my collection. And, oh, there's one more piece. Yes, in case anybody wanted to know. This is the cover for it, if you're wondering which version I bought. It has the elements right here, and I guess I should read this off since I'm trying to be a completionist. The book that formed the basis for the motion picture, It's a Wonderful Life. On the night before Christmas, a mysterious stranger saves George Bailey from a moment of despair by giving him a precious opportunity to understand the difference that his unassuming life makes to those around him and to the world. This 20th century parable, an evergreen reminder of eternal human value, is presented in its original format, the perfect gift for a loved one. Also, real quick, I like how It's a Wonderful Life is inverted Christmas Carol. Whereas in Christmas Carol, he realizes that everything he's done has made people's lives worse. George Bailey realizes everything he's done has made people's lives better. So those two are really cool. At some point, probably maybe next year, I'll read Christmas Carol and talk about it once again. Otherwise, I don't have much more to say right now. Anyways, the inside covers. Just before Christmas in 1943, Philip Van Doren Stern sent to his friends and families copies of a story he had written entitled The Greatest Gift. One of those pamphlets made its way to a producer at RKO Films, who brought the story to the attention of Frank Capra and Jimmy Stewart. Both recently returned from serving in World War II. They quickly became captivated by the idea of a film based on the story, with a director and star attached. The Greatest Gift went on to become the December 1946 release. It's a Wonderful Life, now loved by millions around the world. This edition of The Greatest Gift returns to its original text, bound in its original size, with newly commissioned illustration by Andrew Davidson, inspired by the original drawings of the 1944 edition. In the Afterword, the author's daughter, Margaret Stern Robinson, gives a personal account of the origins of the story and its breakthrough through the movie and into the public imagination. Philip Van Doren Stern, 1900 to 1984, was an American author, editor, and Civil War historian whose story, The Greatest Gift, became the basis of the beloved Christmas film, It's a Wonderful Life. Meet the authors, watch videos, and more at simonandschuster.com. Jacket designed by Marlon Dantes. Jacket illustrations by Andrew Davidson. Printed in the USA. Copyright 2014, Simon and Schuster. And I think that's about everything. I am shaking for some reason. Probably gonna do stuff. Gotta do stuff with the family. So anyways, if I remember to, and I have enough time, I'm gonna put the illustrations up, and you can just watch them after the video. So, yes. I believe that's everything. Have a Merry Christmas and a wonderful life. And I hope you receive the greatest gift of all. Well, I'm happy you received the greatest gift of all. Whew. There's my cat.